one that we did. We practiced, and today, as programmed by our calendar, we're going to be seeing the theory of the fourth and last question of the speaking section. Okay, guys? Today we'll see the theory, we'll practice tomorrow, and then we'll see something else. So, is this okay so far? Do you guys have any questions before we start today's class? Nope, all clear. Okay, guys, good. Then let's take a look at the fourth and last question of the speaking section. Okay, guys. So this question, to be honest, in terms of the format, it's pretty simple. And I would even dare to say that for some of you guys, you're going to find it easier than the previous, than question 3. Why? Because you don't have to connect ideas anymore. For this question, you'll basically just listen to a lecture. So it's just listening. You listen to the lecture. It's usually about 2 minutes. And then you need to summarize the lecture. You get 20 seconds this time to prepare. You don't get 30 anymore because it's just a lecture. And you get 1 minute to answer the question or to summarize the lecture. Okay, guys? So the format is pretty simple to understand. You listen a lecture and then prepare your response, summarize the lecture. Okay, guys? Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about this, the format? Okay, guys, good. Then, okay. The first thing that you need to know is that the lectures that you guys will hear, they always have the same structure. They always have the exact same structure. Now, what is this structure? Pretty simple to understand as well. During the first 20, 30, sometimes even 40 seconds, you guys will be listening to an introduction, where the professor pretty much introduces the topic and maybe gives a short explanation about the topic. So, for example, the professor can start talking about pollution. So during this introduction, the professor explains what pollution is, maybe gives a short explanation, defines it, whatever. That's the introduction. The first 20, 30 seconds, you guys will see, you guys will notice when you're hearing the introduction. Now, when you guys are listening to this introduction, you don't have to take any notes, okay? When you're listening to the introduction, I just want you to actively pay attention and try to understand what the topic actually is. Don't write anything down because you won't need any notes for the introduction. Okay, guys? And then here's the most important part. Every single time, this topic, let's say pollution, will be divided or will be broken down into 2 different subtopics, 2 different unities, 2 different ideas. So if we're talking about pollution, maybe you have 2 different causes of pollution, cause 1 and cause 2, or 2 different effects of pollution, effect 1, effect 2, 2 different definitions of pollution, 2 different ways of solving pollution, let's say. Way number 1, way 2. No matter what you have, you always have 2 big subtopics, 2 big subtitles, if you want to see it that way. And each subtitle, each subtopic contains 1 example. So for example, the professor says, today we will be talking about pollution. Pollution is the way that our environment is being contaminated or destroyed, whatever. And then you have the first subtopic. We're going to talk about 2 different causes of pollution. The first cause is, and then you have the first subtopic, right? The first cause is, I don't know, industries or economic development. And the professor explains a little bit. As countries start developing economically, they start growing more industries, which end up contaminating the air. For example, and then the professor gives 1 example of the first subtopic. So for example, Coca-Cola company is one of the most or the biggest polluters and blah, blah. So every subtopic has its own example. You can have another subtopic. Another big cause of pollution is I don't know, the creation of roads, let's say, or the deforestation. And then the professor explains, I don't know, trees are essential for producing quality air, whatever. And then the professor gives an example. For example, in the Amazon, they have destroyed 20% of forests by, I don't know, catching or by setting forest fires, let's say. So you always have specific examples of each subtopic. Okay, guys? It always works like that. You always have two subtopics and two examples, one for each. And that is the most important thing. That is your job. Your job is to find out what those subtopics are and to also catch the examples, both examples and their details. Okay, guys, this is by far the most important part. This is what your focus should be. And then, of course, you may have some additional details that are not too important. So you don't care about them. The most important part is for you to understand the two topics and the two examples. And of course, you gotta take notes of those, okay? Because you won't only listen to the lecture once. So what do you think so far? Do you have any questions about this, about the structure of this lecture? We will see it with an example, don't worry. But do you have any questions so far? Okay. One very important thing that you guys need to consider is that you should be aiming for taking organized notes. So you should try to organize your notes in this way. You know that you'll always have two topics and two examples, so make sure that you have them ordered so that you maybe can leave those indentation, perhaps, or just maybe a bullet point, or I don't know, numbers, whatever you want to do to signal the subtopics and the examples. Okay, it's really important that you guys have that. And again, you don't have to write everything down. This is another important tip. For example, to be honest, that was a problem for me because I wanted to write everything down. Don't do that. Start classifying the information. Think about what is more relevant and what is not relevant, because at the end of the day, you won't have time to mention everything. So you do have to summarize things and you have to classify information. Guys, do you have any questions before we start seeing the example? Okay, guys, perfect. Then let's see the example. Let's see our first example for this. Yes, I'm going to play the lecture. Please be ready to take notes. I need you all to take organized notes. Okay, sorry.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between two products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between two products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between two identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of two major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay, guys, good. So first of all, before getting into the subtopics and the examples, who can tell me a little bit about what this lecture was about? What would you guys say the topic of this lecture was?
It was about how the consumers choose about products and without, well, in the case that costs in the same price, how the customer choose one product, and this was about features.
Exactly, how the customer chooses one product, and this was about quality, right, rather than features. It was about quality. So yes, if somebody wants to buy something, a product, and you see two products that cost the same, what determines your choice? So what makes you want to buy one or the other product? And the professor says that what makes you buy one product is its quality. But how do you know that a product is a high quality product? And the professor starts talking about that. Now, as you guys probably notice, it can be hard to actually know what the lecture was about. Or even if you know what the lecture was about, it can be hard to explain it. And it takes some time, right? So you need to explain things a little bit, and it takes time. So what we're going to do is, as soon as, remember that I told you not to take any notes from the introduction? So the reason why I told you not to take any notes is because I don't want you to get confused. You will get the question on your screen after you finish listening to the lecture. And if you guys notice, the question says, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality. You will always have the topic in the question. Okay, this was the topic, the two major factors of product quality. That was the topic. So I don't want you guys wasting your time trying to summarize what the topic was when you're speaking, because you have to tell me what the topic is when you guys speak. But you're not going to waste your time trying to explain or summarize everything that you heard in the lecture. You're just gonna say whatever you have in the question. Whatever you have after the word explain, that is always going to be the topic of the lecture. So I want you guys to use this when you're speaking. So if you want, you can take notes about this. As soon as you get the question, maybe you can write it down if you want, but you don't need to because the question won't disappear. It will be on your screen when you're speaking. So you guys can just read whatever you have in the question. Okay, guys? So that is really important. Again, the topic in this case were the two major factors of product quality. So we're going to write that down. Two major factors of product quality, that was the topic. And that also tells us a little bit about what the subtopics were. We were looking at two different factors. So can you guys tell me what was the first subtopic? What was the first factor?
Reliability.
Exactly, reliability. What is reliability? The professor gives a couple of definitions. Could anybody please tell me what reliability was?
Maybe a product that works how we expect, that it doesn't have, or it's the absence of deficiency.
Exactly, the absence of defects. Great. So yes, we definitely had more than just one definition, right? The professor gives a couple. These are two of them, and it's perfect. When the product works the way we expect, and when it doesn't have any defects. Perfect. And we also had an example of reliability. So can you please tell me what was the example the professor gives about reliability? What was the example of reliability?
I'm not sure, but the example was a car and it doesn't need any repairs.
Exactly. That's it. That was the example. So the professor says, for example, a car, if you buy a car, how do you know that a car is reliable? When it doesn't need repairs, right? Too soon after buying the car. When it works well, the way that you would expect a car to work, and it go a reasonable amount of time without needing reparation, or without you having to take it to the mechanics. So that's a reliable car, a car that works. Now, what about the second subtopic? What was the second factor of product quality?
Features,
Exactly, features. And what are features?
It's something that it makes easier to use.
Exactly. Sorry, anything else?
No. I want to talk about the example, but
Okay, good. Yes, but before we get to the example, yes, you're right. Features are those characteristics, those things that make products easier to use, that make them more appealing, more attractive, more cool for the consumer. And yes, can you tell me about the examples?
he talked about a car that some cars have air conditioner or electronic windows, and that makes a car like feature.
Exactly. So the features of a car would be electronic windows, air conditioning, stereos, sunroofs, I think we also mentioned. All of those are features that make the car more attractive, right? That make the car easier to use, that make it more comfortable, and so forth. Okay, guys. So yes, this is the information that we got from the lecture. As you guys can see, you have two subtopics, two examples, each one illustrating the idea in the subtopic. And as I told you, the topic is whatever you have in the question. That's always going to be the topic, so try not to take any notes from the introduction. Okay, guys? Do you have any questions so far? Is this okay? Is this clear? Okay then, so you already read the question. It says using points and examples from the lecture. So you have to use the details, the examples of cars, the definitions that we have for reliability and features. And you need to do that in order to explain these two factors, reliability and features of product quality. So pretty simple, just summarize the lecture. That's basically it. Explain the two factors of product quality with the examples. So nothing, it's not like the third question where you needed to connect the ideas. You just have to summarize the lecture, do it in the same order. It's about classifying information and understanding, of course. And you would have 20 seconds to prepare. And as I usually say, you can do whatever you want with these 20 seconds, sorry. It's up to what you need, what you need to do. So remember to always try to ask yourself that, right? What do I need to do during those 20 seconds? Do I have to work on my notes? Do I have to prepare or rehearse? Do I have to just think about the introduction, prepare the introduction, organize your notes, eliminate information, depending on what you guys need. But you have 60 seconds to answer the question. And we're going to do the same, all of us are going to do the same during those 60 seconds. So let's take a look at the template for this question. This is it. Pretty simple and pretty straightforward as well. Remember that we have a total of 60 seconds to do this. So during the first 10 seconds, the first 1/5 of the response, you guys will have a brief introduction, okay? What do you do in the introduction? You mentioned the topic of the lecture. And what is the topic? The question, right? What you have in the question after the word explain. So you don't have to do anything here but read. You say the lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality. That information, you're getting it from the question. So you don't have to do anything but look at the question when you're doing your introduction. And 10 seconds is more than enough to do that. The lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality. Careful, it discusses because it's conjugated in the third person. It discusses. And careful with the grammar. You don't need to use, please don't use the word about, okay? I don't know why, but many times we overuse the word about. So you don't have to say the lecture discusses about. No, you go directly to the topic. The lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality. The lecture discusses this idea, discusses that problem, discusses quality, discusses the template, whatever it is, but you don't need the word about. And it happens, and it's the same when you have these verbs. Explain, mention, describe. You don't have to say explain about. No. The professor explains features, explains quality. You don't have to use the word about. Okay, so careful with that. But that's pretty much it. That's your introduction. The first 10 seconds of the response time. Pretty simple. You just read whatever you have in the question. Okay, guys? Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about that?
No.
All clear? Hey guys, good, I'm glad. All right. Now, after your introduction is over, you have 50 seconds all to yourself to explain the two subtopics and the two examples, okay? What do you need to consider? You need to take into account that you need transition words or transitions in general. It could be phrases as well. So to talk about the first subtopic, you need to say first, to start, to begin with. You need a transition to move on to the next. You need a transition to give the examples, for instance, to illustrate, to exemplify, I don't know, to give an example, illustrating, whatever transition you want to use, but you need a transition before introducing these ideas. And you also need to give credit to the professor. You cannot talk about these ideas like these were your own, like this is information that you have. You can't do that. You need to report the information, summarize it, right? So you need to say the professor says that, the professor talks about, the professor explains, the professor mentions. You need to use those reporting verbs. You need to use them in the simple present. It's not the professor talked about, it's the professor talks about. The lecture discusses, simple present. And also be careful with the pronoun of the professor. As soon as you guys hear the professor speak, and you notice if it's female or male, write down the pronoun in big letters. So in this case, as soon as you hear her speak, you should write down the word she, so that you don't forget that you have to use that pronoun when you're referring to the professor. Okay, guys? Remember, you have 50 seconds. So to make it balanced, you should be aiming for using 25 in the first topic in its example, and 25 in the second subtopic in the second example. Okay, guys? And that's it. You don't need a conclusion. You don't need anything else. I don't think you will have time for a conclusion because it takes some time to explain the ideas here. You have 2 ideas and 2 examples at the end of the day, so it is a little bit long, but I'm pretty sure you guys can do it. Save time in the introduction. Please don't waste your time here. 10 seconds is all you need. Okay, guys? So what do you think so far? Do you have any questions at all about this template, the use of the template, or anything? No questions. Okay, guys, good. Well, let me give you an example. I'm going to do it. So you guys get to see how I organize my time, how I deliver the information, grammar I use, the use of the template, and all of those things. Okay, guys. So it could be something like this. The lecture discusses the 2 major factors of product quality. First, the professor talks about reliability, which is defined as the absence of defects in a product or when the product works the way that the consumer would expect it to work. For instance, a car will be reliable when it works the way it should, when it doesn't need repairs too soon after buying the car, and when it works as expected. Then the professor explains features, which are those extra characteristics that a product has that are not necessary, but that make the product easier to use or that make them more appealing for the consumer. To illustrate, she gives the example of cars as well, and she explains that air conditioning, sunroofs, stereos, and so forth are all of the features that today's cars have. Right? So I almost ran out of time. I think I probably needed like 1 more second, but I tried to accommodate my response to the time that I had, right? I spoke very calmly, even slowly, in order to avoid making mistakes. I tried to articulate the words as much as I could. I tried to be careful with the grammar, especially with the conjugations, right? Cars have, a car has. Careful with the verbs. Usually the conjugations of the verbs is what many students struggle with. I use the template. I try to follow the timelines that I have for each part using less than 10 seconds in the introduction. If you can use less than 10, that's perfect, because that means that you will have more time for the important part. And I try to distribute the ideas properly, right? I try to balance the ideas. To be honest, I wanted to also mention something that I think is important. She says that in the past, reliability used to be the deciding factor, right? Reliability used to be the number 1 thing that consumers looked at. But now, every product has the same reliability. Every product is reliable. So people have switched and they look at features now, right? So features has become the new deciding factor. I wanted to also say that, but you need to be able to leave some things out because you don't have enough time to mention everything. So if I need to balance what's more important, then I will choose to focus on the subtopics and the examples rather than those additional details. Okay, guys? So Is that okay? I don't know if you guys have any questions, any comments. Okay, that's awesome. So don't worry, we're going to practice a little bit today, and of course we'll be practicing tomorrow in a practice session. And if you take the speaking sessions, we'll be practicing them as well. But before we start, I wanted to also let you know that the topics are exactly the same as what we had for question 3. The topics stay the same. That means that most of the time, majority of times, 90% of the time, you will find psychology, biology, or business, right? Psychology concepts, things related to the way we learn, the way we experience things, our emotions, the way we interact, our memory. Biology related to animals and plants, the way that they have adapted to changes, the way that they have evolved, the way that they relate to each other, and stuff like that. And business, marketing, advertisement, pricing, diversifying, growing a business, maybe starting a business, things like that, right? Those type of concepts are the ones that you guys can see. And of course, as everything, there's a margin of error. So there's a small chance that you can have something different, maybe something in the arts, sociology, let's say literature, history, and all of those other topics, academic topics. Okay, guys, remember to check out vocabulary for these topics. Remember to listen to podcasts, watch videos, read articles, learn business words, start to be familiarized with this type of content. Because it's not the same to have an everyday English and be able to talk to a friend than academic English, right? And remember that the TOEFL test measures your ability to speak academic English, not everyday English. So careful there. Any questions about this? It all clear? So what was the one that we did? What was the topic of the one that we just did? Business, right? It was business. So let's try to do a psychology one and then a biology one. And I think that'd be great for today. But if we have more time, we'll do more, don't worry. Let's see. Yes, come on. Okay, guys, so let's do psychology. Okay, I'm gonna play the lecture. Please be ready to take notes.
Why do we do the things we do? What drives us to participate in certain activities, to buy a certain car, or even to choose a certain career? In other words, what motivates us to do what we do? Well, in studies of motivation, psychologists distinguish between two very different types. Our reasons for doing something, our motivations, can be extrinsic. In other words, based on some kind of external reward, like praise or money. Or they can be intrinsic, meaning we engage in the activity because it pleases us internally. Both create strong forces that lead us to behave in certain ways. However, intrinsic motivation is generally considered to be more long-lasting than the other. As I said, extrinsic motivation is external. It's the desire to behave in a certain way in order to obtain some kind of external reward. A child, for example, who regularly does small jobs around the house, does them not because she enjoys taking out the garbage or doing the dishes, but because she knows if she does these things, she'll be given a small amount of money for doing them. But how motivated would the child be to continue doing the work if her parents suddenly stopped giving her money for it? With intrinsic or internal motivation, we want to do something because we enjoy it or get a sense of accomplishment from it. Most people who are internally motivated get pleasure from the activity, so they just feel good about doing it. For example, I go to the gym several times a week. I don't go because I'm training for a marathon or anything. I just enjoy it. I have more energy after I exercise, and I know it's good for my health, so it makes me feel good about myself. And that's what's kept me going there for the past 5 years.
Okay. So, using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of motivation. Now you guys will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So is there anyone who would like to try, maybe? Anybody?
Okay, can I try?
Yeah, of course. Sana, please, you may start speaking now.
The lecture discusses two types of motivations. First, the professor talked about extrinsic motivation, which is when we behave in some way to receive an external reward, like for example, the professor gives the example of the kids that help in the house with taking the garbage out or washing the dishes because the parents give them money. So if they don't receive the money, it's probably that they will stop doing that activities. Then the professor explains about intrinsic motivation, which is more motivation inside ourselves. Like we do something because we enjoy to do that. And she gave the example to go to the gym because he goes to the gym because he feels good.
Exactly. She goes to the gym because she feels good. Right? Don't forget the pronouns. It was really good, though. I would say I was almost nearly a perfect response. You just needed some more seconds. It was just managing your time. And the last part, you got nervous. That's why you made the mistakes too, because you were running out of time. So my only advice would be to always make sure that you are looking at the clock constantly as you finish ideas. And when you have more than one definition, you don't need to mention them all. For example, in intrinsic motivation, you said when the motivation comes from within ourselves, from inside ourselves. I would stop there, depending on how much time you have. But you continue to explain, giving other definitions. So just give one. It's the same as, for example, in the previous one. So reliability, we have many definitions. The absence of defects, when the product works the way it should, or the way that the consumer expected to work, when it doesn't need repairs. You just mention one of them and it's enough. So depending on how much time you have. So maybe that would be one tip. The content was perfect. All of the ideas were well explained, well summarized. I like your introduction, the fact that you didn't explain, that you went directly for the two types. The examples were correct and they were precise because you didn't generalize. You talk about exactly what the professor talks about kids and their parents giving them money for doing the household tasks, and the professor going to the gym. The definitions were correct, the subtopics were correct. Maybe some expressions, instead of in the house, you can always say at home. Careful, determines, so those activities versus that activity. But those would be just minimum details. I would say it was a great response. Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, guys, do you have any questions so far? Everything clear? That was a psychology one. Motivation. Okay, then let's do another one. This time we can aim for biology. Okay, guys, so I'm going to play the lecture. Please pay attention and take notes.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
We all know that insects like to eat plants, but some plants have been able to develop ways to protect themselves from insects. Today I'm going to talk about some ways plants defend themselves. Now, some plants have physical features that prevent insects from landing on them, like the passion plant, for example. Its leaves have little spiky hairs all over them. They're like spikes sticking out of the plant that are so numerous and dense that they prevent insects from landing on the leaves. Basically, there's just no room for the insect to land. And since insects can't land on the leaves, they can't eat them. So the little hairs serve as a physical feature that helps protect the passion plant from insects. All right, but other plants protect themselves using chemical defenses, like the potato plant. The potato plant's able to release a chemical throughout its leaf system whenever an insect attacks it, starts eating the leaf. So, say an insect starts eating a potato plant's leaf. That will cause the plant to react by releasing a chemical throughout its leaf system. The insect swallows this chemical as it eats, and this chemical discourages the insect from wanting to eat any more of the plant. How? Well, the substance makes the insect feel full, like it's already had enough to eat. The insect no longer feels hungry, so it stops eating the plant. So, by emitting this chemical, the potato plant protects itself from insects.
Okay. Now, using points from the lecture, explain how the passion plant and the potato plant defend themselves from insects. Okay, in this case, the topic will be, we are not going to focus on the details, right? It will be just how plants in general defend themselves from insects. These were the examples. So careful there. Now you guys will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So is there anyone who would like to try this one here?
Okay, can I try?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, please, Norca.
Okay. The lecture discuss how plants defend themselves from insects. First, the professor talked about physical defenses like spikes here. Some plants have spikes here to prevent insects from landing on their leaves, so that makes that plants uneatable. And it's for protection. For example, passion plants. And then she explains chemical defenses to realize a chemical in the insect system, so they don't want to eat anymore. For example, potato plants. The plants realize a chemical in the insect system, so the insects feel like they don't have hungry anymore and stops keep eating them.
Exactly, perfect. Really well done. Instead of they don't have hungry, they are not hungry anymore, right? Or they feel full. But it was a great response, amazing, Noelia, to be honest. Biology tends to be a little bit harder, to be honest, but you did great. I mean, you did a great job. You identified the two subtopics very well. So, well, the topic is in the question, how plants defend themselves from insects. The two subtopics would be the physical defenses, as you said, and the chemical defenses. You explained physical defenses, how some plants have these spiky hairs that prevents insects from landing on their leaves. And you gave correctly the example of the passion plant that contains these spiky hairs. Same thing goes for the second one. The content was great, how these plants release chemicals in order for the insects to feel full and not to want to eat their leaves anymore. I don't think I have any comments. The only maybe detail, careful with the word release, right? Remember to release chemicals like liberar, release. Realize is something else, right? Darse cuenta. When you realize you're doing something wrong, the plants release chemicals, right? Liberar, they release. It was great, Noelia, well done. So what do you guys think so far? In this type of questions, when you have biology, it's always going to be the same structure. And to be honest, from what I've seen, most of the time you have things like this. So how plants defend themselves from insects, how animals defend themselves from attackers, how animals survive, how animals catch food. And it's always like this. You have two different subtopics, and then the examples are always going to be names or specific animals or specific plants. Then you will see with more examples what I mean. But yes, this is a really good example of how it would be. So we did psychology, we did business, we did biology. Let's do something different now, and I think that's gonna be a good practice. So please get ready to take notes. I'm going to play the next lecture. Here we go.
Listen to part of a talk in an art appreciation class.
In order for art to communicate, to appeal to the emotions or the intellect, it has to combine various visual elements to express meaning or emotion. It's really the visual components of the work, things like color, texture, shape, lines, and how these elements work together that tell us something about the work. Artists combine and manipulate these visual elements to express a message or to create a mood. Think about how a painter might use color, for example. You all know from experience that different colors appeal in different ways to the senses and can convey different meanings. An artist chooses certain colors to evoke a particular mood and make powerful statements. The color red, for example, is a strong color and can conjure up strong emotions, such as extreme joy or excitement or even anger. Blue, on the other hand, is considered a cool color. Blue colors tend to have a calming effect on viewers. Another visual element important to art is texture. By texture, I mean the surface quality or feel of the work, its smoothness or roughness or softness. Now, of course, in some types of art, the texture is physical. It can actually be touched by the fingers. But in painting, for example, texture can be visual. The way an artist paints certain areas of a painting can create the illusion of texture, an object's smoothness or roughness or softness. A rough texture can evoke stronger emotions and strength, while a smooth texture is more calming and less emotional. As I said earlier, artists often combine elements to convey a message about the work. Take a painting that, say, uses a lot of strong colors like reds and oranges and uses brush strokes that are broad, wide sweeping brush strokes that suggest a rough texture. Well, these elements together can convey a wilder, more chaotic emotion in the viewer more than in, say, a painting with tiny, smooth brush strokes and soft or pale colors. Artists use these visual effects and the senses they arouse to give meaning to their work.
Okay. Now the question says, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the importance of visual elements in painting. And now you guys will have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys, is there anyone who would like to try? Anyone? Okay, guys, so the topic is the importance of visual elements in painting, right? Were you able to catch what the two subtopics were? We had two visual elements, right? The first one was?
Color and texture.
Exactly, color and texture. So that's it. And we had examples, right? And in the examples of color, what was the example? Or what were the examples in this case?
It's the red that is strong and the blue that is more relaxed.
Exactly. And what about texture? What were the examples there?
Softness, roughness, smoothness.
Exactly. How those types of texture can evoke particular emotions or evoke particular or express particular meanings, right? So that's pretty much it. You will have to say in the lecture, the professor, well, I'm forgetting the template. The lecture discusses the importance of visual elements in painting. First, the professor talks about color, right? She explains that artists use color in order to evoke particular emotions or to give meaning to their work. For For example, the blue color is associated or is considered more calm, so it evokes a calm effect on the viewer, whereas the red color usually evokes stronger emotions, perhaps anger or I think anger, right, was an example. And then the professor explains texture, which is the soft or the feel of the work. It can be implied or it can be visual texture or it can be actual texture. And as the professor gives the example of the softness, if a painting uses soft strokes, it can evoke calm in the viewer. But if the painter uses rough strokes, then you can have a stronger effect, right? And that's pretty much it. Then you can maybe, if you have extra time, talk about how the painting can combine both of them, but that's just an additional detail, right? What mattered the most was the two subtopics in their two examples. Okay, guys? So is that okay? Do you guys have any questions about this task or in general? No questions? Is everything clear? Okay, guys, cool. Then tomorrow we're going to continue practicing. We'll be answering as many questions as we can in different types of examples. But please, before you go today, don't forget today's daily survey. It should be on your screens. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow in class, in our practice session.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye.